and it allows us to have an image of Christ.
Legends about a miraculous image of
touched the face of Christ and then bore a miraculous image.
The simple truth is that a new debate has started around the Last Supper. Some people are saying that AI has picked up hidden patterns or signals in it that no one had ever noticed before. And what has come out is not only surprising people, but also making them think. During the Renaissance, there were many big names, but a mind like Leonardo da Vinci was very rare. He didn't just create paintings. He tried to understand everything deeply. That's why this painting has been examined countless times over the last 500 years, scanned, restored, analyzed with high-tech methods. Everything has been done. And yet, some things remained hidden, even though they were right in front of everyone's eyes. Just imagine, people sat under it for centuries, ate their meals there, looked at it every day, experts studied it again and again. But still, no one could reach that one thing that might have always been there. It is often said that Da Vinci didn't see art as just beauty, but as a kind of message. And maybe that's why, instead of showing his ideas directly, he hid them somewhere within his work. Now, when AI was trained to understand his writing and style, the same painting was looked at from a completely new perspective, and it started to feel like there was something beneath the surface that could also be read. And once you begin to see it, it becomes almost impossible to ignore. If you enjoy such mysterious and mind-bending stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because what's coming next might surprise you even more. Now, let's talk about his secrets. Da Vinci was not the kind of person who trusted people easily. This isn't just a story. It's clearly visible in his notebooks. He wrote thousands of pages, but not in a simple, straightforward way. He used mirror writing, which means writing in reverse, something that can only be read using a mirror. Some people say he did this because he was left-handed, so the ink wouldn't smudge. But many believe there was also an intention to hide things, and it didn't stop at writing backwards. He created his own shorthand, used strange codes, and made geometric sketches whose full meaning is still not completely understood. So it's clear, Da Vinci wasn't just making paintings, he was also hiding the secrets of his mind somewhere. And maybe now technology is slowly starting to reveal them. In simple terms, he kept his ideas hidden the way someone locks their house, safe and away from others' eyes. And there was a strong reason behind it. Leonardo da Vinci was living in a time when the Catholic Church had a strong influence over everything, especially knowledge and thought. If someone questioned religious beliefs, the consequences could be very serious. History makes this clear. Galileo Galilei was placed under house arrest simply for saying that the earth revolves around the sun, and Giordano Bruno was burned alive for his ideas. In an environment like that, a person like Leonardo da Vinci, who was already known for his unique thinking and curiosity, couldn't speak openly about everything. He knew that if he said anything beyond the limits, he might have to pay a heavy price for it. So instead of speaking directly, he chose a clever approach. He hid his ideas inside his paintings, so they were right there in front, but not easy for everyone to understand. And maybe his intention was that someday, in the future, someone would come along who could decode these hidden signs. Now, take a closer look at his technique. When work on the Last Supper began in 1495 at Santa Maria delle Grazie, he made a decision that surprised other artists. At that time, the buon fresco method was the most common, painting on wet plaster so the colors would settle into the wall and last for years. But Da Vinci didn't follow this method. He created his own technique, mixing oil and tempera and painting on a dry wall. This gave the painting more depth and fine detail, but it also created a major problem. The paint started to deteriorate quickly. Within just a few years, it began to peel off the wall. For centuries, people considered this his mistake, like it was a failed experiment. But this is where the story becomes a bit mysterious, because what was visible might not have been the full truth. One thing most people don't notice is that Da Vinci's unique painting style made something possible that normal fresco couldn't: multiple layers. The paint was applied layer upon layer, and whatever might have been written or drawn underneath became almost completely hidden. Just think. If something had been written on the plaster first and then covered with paint, it wouldn't just be hidden from ordinary people, but even from experts who have been restoring it for years, even from older X-rays or scanning tools. Now think about the logic. If you had to hide a message, something so dangerous that it could cost your life if discovered, but you also wanted it to survive for a very long time so that someone in the future could understand it, you would need two things: a place that no one would even think of disturbing, and a method of hiding it that couldn't be detected by the technology of that time. And interestingly, Leonardo da Vinci's technique, whether intentional or not, fits both of these conditions. For nearly 500 years, the Last Supper remained there. Monks sat and ate beneath it. Soldiers of Napoleon Bonaparte used the place like a stable. In 1943, bombing destroyed the surrounding area, yet the painting somehow survived, as if it was meant to. Despite so many eyes, so many years, and so much examination, no one could fully understand what might be hidden within or beneath it. In the end, it wasn't humans, but machines that were needed to start uncovering this mystery. Now here's an important point. We also need to look at what real science says, because that matters the most. Since the late 20th century, advanced scanning of the Last Supper has been underway. From 1978 to 1999, during a major 21-year restoration project, experts closely examined its surface. During this time, technologies like infrared reflectography and X-rays were used to look beneath the layers of the painting. Yet even then, the most interesting part didn't fully come out. Or maybe it just hasn't been properly understood yet. These scanning technologies did reveal many fascinating details. For example, Leonardo da Vinci's initial sketches, underdrawings, the changes he made while working, and the fine details that had been hidden under years of dust and past restorations, all of this slowly started to become clear. Then, in 2007, a major digital project took place, where the Last Supper was scanned and saved in extremely high quality, around 16 billion pixels. Now the situation is such that this painting can be examined in a level of detail that even Leonardo himself might never have imagined. All these scans, especially the hyperspectral data, were preserved and later used for further research. What's happening now is the next step of that work. The only difference is that this time, machines are not just looking at the images, but trying to understand them. The old high-resolution data was fed into AI systems that were specially trained to recognize Leonardo's mirror writing and the kinds of codes he used in his notebooks. So the technology itself wasn't new. The perspective was. And that's where things started to change. In fact, until now, the biggest limitation was that there was no system capable of clearly distinguishing whether cracks and damage in the wall were caused by time, or were actually intentional markings or writing. It is said that a lab, often referred to as Rossi's lab, developed a special AI model for this exact purpose. And when all this data was fed into it, something unusual started happening after about 19 days. For the first 2 weeks, nothing significant showed up, just the usual things: paint deterioration, cracks in the plaster, and background noise. The system seemed to be working in routine mode. Meanwhile, the scientist leading the research, Rossi, was constantly in the lab, drinking coffee after coffee, spending nights on a small bed there. Slowly, a doubt started creeping into her mind. Was this entire project, something she had spent years on, just turning into a waste of time and money? On the 19th day, things suddenly began to change. The system detected some faint, blurry markings on the wall just behind Jesus in the Last Supper, the same area Rossi had been observing for days but couldn't prove anything about. These marks didn't look like brushstrokes, nor like normal cracks in plaster. They formed a completely different kind of pattern. The AI classified them with a 67% probability as intentional writing, and this number lit up on the screen in red. Now, 67% wasn't solid proof, but it was enough to spark a serious debate. Rossi immediately called senior imaging expert Marco Ferretti, who arrived at the lab before morning. He examined the marks and directly stated that they were simply the result of minerals emerging from the plaster, something he had seen many times in old murals. Nothing unusual. But Rossi didn't agree. She showed a comparison on the screen. On one side, these new markings, and on the other, samples of Leonardo's mirror writing. The curves and patterns looked surprisingly similar, and even the spacing between the marks seemed quite regular. Rossi argued that if this were just fluorescence or a chemical effect, it wouldn't create such precise and repeatable patterns. Ferretti, however, stood firm on his opinion. According to him, a 500-year-old painting couldn't possibly preserve a hidden message like this, and the team was simply seeing what they wanted to see. Not real data, but a kind of mental illusion. At this point, the atmosphere became tense, and the team split into two groups. Some believed this was just an attempt to find patterns in damaged plaster, while others felt they might be on the edge of a major discovery. As the night grew deeper, one by one everyone left the lab. By around 3 a.m., the place had gone completely silent. In the end, Rossi was left alone, but she didn't give up. She picked up a scan from another part of the wall, one that the AI hadn't even flagged yet, and manually fed it into the system to start a fresh analysis, as if she was making one last attempt to catch the truth. Her coffee had gone cold long ago, but her focus was somewhere else. The rejection letter from 2016 was still hanging above her desk for the past 8 years, but she didn't even look at it anymore because her eyes were locked on the monitor. The screen refreshed, and a new confidence score slowly began to appear. There was a strange tension in the air, like something big was about to happen. It felt as if in the next few hours this wouldn't remain just a simple data glitch, but would point towards some long-hidden secret, like a message left behind 500 years ago finally coming to light. Over the next 72 hours, the AI began scanning different parts of the Last Supper in depth, the dark areas under the table, the stone arches in the background, and the deep folds of the clothing. The most surprising thing was that similar markings started appearing again and again, but not randomly. They showed up only in certain specific places, the ones that usually received the least attention. These were the exact areas where something hidden could survive the longest, because cleaning brushes rarely reached there, and the human eye often overlooked them. As the system moved forward, its confidence kept increasing, 71%, then 78%, and then 83%. Slowly, reversed letters began appearing on the screen, matching Leonardo da Vinci's mirror script. The system compared these shapes with samples from his old notes, especially Codex Arundel, and the match kept getting stronger. At first, a few separate words appeared: umbra, shadow; verita, truth; tradimento, betrayal. And then these words started linking together. By now, the entire atmosphere had changed. Ferretti, who had been the most skeptical until then, suddenly went quiet. He didn't openly admit that he believed it, but his silence said a lot. Rossi had realized that this wasn't just an effect of plaster or chemicals. There was something much deeper going on. And the most shocking part was that the AI had processed only about 12% of the painting so far. As more data came in, fragments of words joined together into small sentences, making it clear that these markings were not random. They had been carefully placed with a specific purpose. Gradually, the system began to reveal a clear pattern, like a spiral shape, starting from Jesus' right hand and moving outward, reaching each disciple one by one. And the most astonishing part was that the positions of these words were not random either. They seemed to follow a mathematical principle similar to the golden ratio, the very concept that Leonardo da Vinci was deeply fascinated by. This meant the words weren't just hidden in the painting. They were part of its overall structure and design. The AI was no longer finding simple details. It was uncovering something that felt like a hidden document. The first complete sentence appeared right behind Jesus. When the system interpreted it using Leonardo's old language, its meaning came out as, "When light brings a man's hand into view, trust begins to weaken." Rossi read this line out loud in the lab, and for a few moments the entire room went silent. It took a little time to fully grasp it. It seemed to suggest that what people consider divine might actually be human. And once the truth comes out, belief can start to break. Now, the fact that this message was appearing in the Last Supper, a painting that itself represents a deeply religious and historical moment, made it feel like a kind of hidden time bomb. But at this point, it was still just one line. It could have been a coincidence. Then the AI detected markings in another spot, near Judas's shadow. From there, another line emerged. The one who sits with truth does not deceive himself. Then a third line appeared beneath Peter. Strength without understanding is blind. And near Thomas, who is known for always questioning, another message came up, suggesting that questioning is not a sin, but a path to reaching the truth. Now it was becoming clear that none of this was random. Each message was connected to a specific disciple, and every line pointed not toward blind faith, but toward thinking and questioning. This wasn't a direct attack on religion. It felt more like an invitation for the viewer to think. It started to seem as if Leonardo hadn't just painted a scene here. He had hidden an entire way of thinking inside it, where human curiosity and understanding were just as important as any religious belief. And the most interesting part is that nearly 250 years after Leonardo's work, thinkers like Voltaire spoke about freedom of thought, and Denis Diderot created works like the Encyclopédie, promoting ideas that placed reason and knowledge above all. But the ideas they later expressed, it almost feels like Leonardo had already hidden a similar perspective in his paintings centuries earlier. Later, figures like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, David Hume, and Immanuel Kant gave a new direction to Western thought and led the world into the Age of Enlightenment. But the kind of thinking they explained later, it seems someone like Leonardo da Vinci had already embedded it in his work centuries before. When these philosophers were still about 250 years away from being born, Leonardo wasn't just ahead of his time. It almost feels like he was living in a completely different era. And now, AI was slowly bringing those hidden layers to the surface. Standing there in the lab, Rossi's hands were trembling slightly, not out of fear, but from a strange mix of excitement and disbelief. She had spent 22 years of her life trying to understand this very thing. For all those years, she wrote research papers, spoke at conferences, and kept trying to prove that Leonardo's art had multiple layers that we still hadn't fully understood. But most people dismissed her ideas as too imaginative. In 2016, one review had even outright rejected her theory, saying there was no solid evidence behind it. She had kept that very paper hanging above her desk for years, partly out of frustration and partly as motivation. And now, right in front of her, on the computer screen, letter by letter, everything she had been fighting for all these years was finally appearing. This wasn't just a new discovery. It was her entire career standing at a turning point. If this turned out to be true, her name could become part of history. But if it proved wrong, the same thing could turn against her. Then the AI detected something else, and this time it went even deeper. In the lower right section of the Last Supper, near the feet of the disciples, a long message buried under multiple layers began to appear. When it was pieced together, its meaning came out something like, "Those in power suppress the truth until someone in the future comes along and brings it back to light." Now, this wasn't just something to think about anymore. It felt like a direct challenge to systems and powerful institutions that control and hide information. The atmosphere suddenly became heavier because this was no longer just a discovery. It started to feel like an open accusation. And the strangest part was that this message didn't feel like it was written for people of that time at all. Instead, it felt like it was speaking directly to someone in the future, the person who would eventually read it and bring it to the world. Ferretti, who had been silent for days, finally spoke. In a low voice, he said, "He knew. Someone would find it." That line filled the room with a different kind of silence. If you really think about it, it feels a bit overwhelming. That Leonardo da Vinci, standing in a cold room in Milan in 1497, was painting over his own hidden message. fully aware that no one in his time would ever be able to read it. People sat in front of that painting every day, ate meals under it, prayed beneath it, yet they had no idea that something was hidden within that very wall. His friends, his students, his patrons, all passed by it, but they only saw what was on the surface. The real thing was buried underneath. It's almost as if he was writing for an audience that would be born hundreds of years later, and he trusted that someday someone would find it. Now it felt like AI had proven that his trust wasn't misplaced. Then, the deepest layer appeared. In the Last Supper, just beneath the color of Jesus' robes, so faint that it could only be seen with extremely advanced scanning, the AI revealed one final line. Its meaning was something like, "Truth does not belong to a chosen few, it belongs to those who seek it alone." As soon as Rossi read this line, the entire lab fell silent. But the real surprise was still ahead. The system began doing something on its own, something it hadn't even been specifically programmed for. It started connecting all the pieces it had found so far, moving from the center outward, following the same spiral pattern hidden in the painting. Slowly, all the words came together, forming one long, continuous message spread across the entire painting, woven between each disciple. And it only made sense when read in that specific sequence, the way Leonardo da Vinci had hidden it within the structure of his composition. The final line that appeared on the screen meant something like, "Faith without understanding puts truth to sleep, and only those who awaken will see what has been hidden." Rossi didn't freeze in shock after reading it. Instead, she lowered her head, held it in her hands, and let out a quiet laugh. A laugh filled with surprise, relief, and a little bit of fear. Because she understood exactly what it meant, and also what it could change once it reached the world. The real question was no longer whether they had found something new. The real question was what it would mean if all of this turned out to be true. If future investigations, strict and detailed as they would be, confirmed these results, then it would mean one thing clearly. The Last Supper was not just a religious painting. On the surface, it was a work of devotion. But beneath it, something else was going on, something like a hidden intellectual rebellion. And if Leonardo da Vinci really did something like this here, then the question naturally comes up, did he hide similar things in his other paintings too? Like Mona Lisa, Virgin of the Rocks, or Adoration of the Magi? If the answer is yes, then every one of his paintings kept in museums around the world would need to be re-examined with new technology. This could have an even bigger impact. The Last Supper would no longer be seen as just a sacred religious scene. It could become a work where the artist himself was quietly questioning the very system that people consider most holy. This wouldn't reduce the importance of the painting. It would make it more complex, and maybe even more interesting. From a historical point of view, this idea feels even heavier. The kind of thinking that later appeared during the Age of Enlightenment, reason, questioning, and independent thought. If all of that was already hidden in Leonardo's work, then it means he was far ahead of his time. He wasn't just a great artist, but possibly a thinker who chose to express his ideas indirectly by hiding them. And this leads to an even bigger question. If he did this, then were other artists of that time doing the same? Could there be similar hidden messages in paintings hanging today in places like the Louvre Museum, Uffizi Gallery, or Prado Museum that no one has noticed yet? It's possible that the Last Supper is not a unique case, but just the beginning. This discovery felt like the first crack in a wall that no one even knew existed. And as soon as the news got out, first through a leaked preprint and then across global media, it created exactly the kind of stir Rossi had imagined. Within just 48 hours, James Whitfield, who teaches Renaissance history at the University of Cambridge, appeared in an interview on BBC. He seemed a bit rushed, like he had been called in suddenly, but his point was clear. He said this discovery could be one of the biggest new interpretations of any famous painting, similar to how hidden images inside Pablo Picasso's works were once revealed through X-ray scans. According to him, the combination of spiral patterns and the golden ratio cannot be random. Such precise mathematical structure is almost impossible to form naturally over time, and a wall certainly can't write itself in a language. 3 days later, a response also came from the Vatican. The statement was carefully worded. They appreciated the technology, but also warned against trusting such conclusions too quickly or misinterpreting sacred art. However, inside reports suggested something different. According to sources, several senior figures called it an exaggerated media story. One art historian connected to the church even quietly admitted that if these scans turned out to be true, the church might have to rethink its entire historical relationship with Renaissance artists. Meanwhile, in Milan, as soon as the news spread, around 300 people gathered outside Santa Maria delle Grazie on the very first Saturday. The crowd was divided into two groups. On one side were those demanding that all the scans be made fully public, and on the other side were people holding banners that read, "Let this painting rest in peace. Faith is not data." In Florence, there was also a smaller but intense protest outside the Uffizi Gallery. Some people blocked the main gate for nearly 6 hours, forcing the museum to send visitors in through a different entrance. Eventually, the police had to step in and clear the way. But by then, it was clear that this was no longer just about an art discovery. It was touching people's emotions, beliefs, and history all at once. Within hours, images of police and protesters spread everywhere. In Rome, at St. Peter's Square, some theology students held a peaceful vigil with candles. Their goal wasn't to protest, but to say that this issue needed discussion, not conflict. Online, things got even more heated. The hashtag Da Vinci Decoded kept trending for almost 11 days. Some people linked it to conspiracy theories, claiming that Leonardo da Vinci was part of a secret society. On the other side, those with atheist views presented it as proof that great minds have always questioned organized religion. Meanwhile, religious groups responded by saying that blindly trusting AI interpretations is itself a mistake. On the internet, everyone was interpreting these messages in their own way. Art forums were filled with translations, most of them incomplete or incorrect. For a few days, the Last Supper became one of the biggest topics in the world, a 500-year-old painting hanging in a dining hall of a church in northern Italy. But the real twist came when Ferretti, the same person who had been the most skeptical at the beginning, suddenly became one of its strongest supporters. In an interview with La Repubblica, he said something that completely changed the tone. He clearly stated that people were afraid because they thought this would affect their faith. But according to him, that wasn't true at all. He said this discovery shows that truth and faith are not against each other, and that hiding the truth to protect any kind of authority is not right. The most interesting part was that the same person who had earlier dismissed these results as confirmation bias was now openly supporting them. His shift was so clear that even the rest of the team was surprised, including Rossi. Then, when the full data was made public, Ferretti's photo and statement appeared on the front pages of major newspapers across Europe. Along with that, the team released everything, all the data, to the world. Now the team hid nothing. Every scan, every AI confidence score, and every translation was made public so that any expert could verify it. Within a few weeks, independent analyses from places like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, University of Amsterdam, and Kyoto University made one thing clear. These markings did not look like normal plaster damage, meaning this didn't seem like a simple coincidence. After that, the debate didn't end. It just moved to a new level. Now the question was no longer whether it was real or not, but what it meant and who had the right to interpret it. Slowly, it began to feel like Leonardo da Vinci hadn't just created the Last Supper, but had also left behind something like a time capsule within it. Something not meant for the people of his own time, because such ideas could have been dangerous back then, but for the future, when people would be ready to understand it. And the surprising part is that after nearly 500 years, a machine, trained to understand his own writing, was the one that finally read that hidden message. And what came out wasn't just a small sign or symbol, it was a full conversation, one that began in 1497. Hidden inside a wall, in a quiet room in Milan, waiting for a mind capable of understanding it. And now it feels like that mind has finally arrived in our time. Now here's a question for you. If Leonardo really did hide such a deep message, what do you think he was trying to warn us about? And is it possible that other great paintings or artworks also hold secrets that we still haven't understood? Do share your thoughts. And if stories like this make you think, stay connected, because it's possible that history is still hiding a lot, and this might just be the beginning.